y'all, I'm Ellen. We've been super inspired by our journeys of self-healing and discovery.
And I'm Sam, and we want to share our experiences with you to help you get curious about yourself, reconnect, and get intentional about your life so you know what makes you happy.
Welcome to Woo New, the podcast. So today we're talking to Erin Smith of Vardo Tarot. And she's somebody that I had heard about through the grapevine through some of my friends who are just religious about seeing her on the regular. And I had just been hearing her name over and over and over again for years now, and never really got a chance to sit with her and do a reading with her until fairly recently. And the thing with Erin that blows my mind is that she's now studying for her master's in psychology because she's realizing the power of being able to combine her tarot reading with therapy as well, because so much trauma gets brought up through the tarot readings. So it was a really fascinating conversation with Erin.
Yeah, she was so much fun to talk to. Her story is really fascinating, and all of the women in this mini-series, her energy is just so open and inviting, you know, like I felt immediately comfortable with her when I met her. She was very sweet. Her story is really inspiring. And like, I can't say enough about all of these women who are bringing these Eastern and Western practices together, and like what a magical combination that is. Like, she is going to have such a special gift to offer. And I am so excited for her that she's doing that, because I think it's just the coolest idea ever.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And even recently, we had seen that New York Times article about how therapists are now kind of dipping into astrology and tarot and all these other types of modalities, I would say, like that are not typically considered psychological modalities, but because their patients are coming to them with, you know, psychic readings and tarot readings to kind of unpack, they're realizing how powerful a tool that is for them to be able to incorporate that into their therapy. So for Erin to be able to embody both sides of it seems just almost kind of like a no-brainer and indicative of the wave that I think this whole practice is going to go.
Yeah, it's kind of like the EFT in that, like, that degree will give her a lot of tools to help her clients sort of walk through things that come up and understand them better and get more out of the readings in a way that, like, you know, someone who's not trained to talk through those things may not necessarily be able to do as easily.
Right.
I think it's amazing. She's really awesome. I highly recommend her.
I'm attempting to get my master's now. I'm in the process of getting the master's, and I want to have a more sort of traditional therapeutic practice, you know, along the lines of what people, you know, think of, more or less with a Jungian base, because obviously tarot lends itself very well to that. But I still really want to make myself available to the general public as a tarot reader, and mostly because it's this middle ground, you know? It's like, you know, when I go out in public on Saturdays and Sundays in Atwater Village, I very purposefully keep my price point low. I very purposefully am sort of a walk-in based, you know, have walk-in based availability. And, you know, I've been doing it now for years, and people know where to find me. You know, towards the end of the week, people are like, are you going to be in Atwater Village? I have people who come see me sometimes every week. They've been doing it for years. And it really is this beautiful check-in for people where they can get this one-on-one kind of intimate connection with somebody and just drop in and see what's going on in their world through the lens of the tarot. And it feeds a very specific need in society that I think in some ways is not being served. And that is connection. Yeah. Intimate connection. There is something that happens when somebody comes on my truck and sits down for a reading, and we are connecting in this very specific way through the cards. And oftentimes what happens is they'll start to cry and I'll start to cry. And it establishes this feeling of witnessing. You are seen by me, the practitioner who's reading the cards, and you are seen by the universe in terms of these pictorial images arranging themselves to say something about your spiritual condition at this moment in time. And it's profound, and people walk away with a sense of like, things aren't random. I'm not just floating around in space randomly trying to make sense of all this stuff. That there's a way to track these things intelligently and then get a sense of what choices to make in life. Because that's the other thing. Like, I think this idea that tarot is rigidly predictive is actually kind of a misnomer. I like to frame it in this way, that if you were to tell me that you were going to run a marathon, but you weren't going to train for it, and you weren't going to drink any water the day of the race, I could reasonably predict that you wouldn't finish that race.
Yes, that would be a good guess.
and I think that this is really what tarot is like too, because there is no one future possibility that's set in stone. And so I never like to give people this idea that I'm going to tell you your future, because your future is being born out of every choice that you're making in your present. And so I believe that the purpose of the tarot is to give you the wisest, most elegant view of what's going on energetically in your world right now, so that you can make the best possible choices that will ultimately affect your future. And also because the other thing is, like, we all have free will, right? Like, things come up in readings, and what you do with that information is sort of your business. Do you know what I mean? I'm not here to tell people what to do. I'm not here to, make prescriptions for people, only to give them the tools and the insight to work with their situation in the way they feel is best.
It's about making better choices.
Totally. That's what I think. Yeah.
That's and more really informed choices.
More informed. Because look, here's the thing. This is true for me. I think it's true for most of us. It's very hard to be objective about your own situation.
You're so in it. Yeah.
You're in it. And oftentimes we overthink things. We get lost in the narrative. Well, there's this to consider, and what about this, and then this. And sometimes it's hard to just drop into what we're feeling about something intuitively. And so to have somebody sit across the table for you and through this tool connect you to that intuition can be extremely helpful. And in general, people say things to me like, this is confirming things I've already knew about myself. It's not revealing, wildly out there information. It is really connecting people with their own intuitive sense about what's going on in their lives. And like I said, I feel like it's very effective. I mean, I've been doing it long enough, and I've done enough readings now to sort of track this pattern of people saying, that was really helpful, right? That when I came to see you, I took all that information and I felt like things really shifted for the positive. I also think that just the fact that you're dealing with these, like, I've given a lot of thought, like, what is it that makes this modality so effective? There's something amazing about having this story laid out in front of you in these distinct images, and it's relatable, right? People are like, I understand what those images mean, and yet they're able to detach from them enough to not get caught up in the particulars of their own situation. And it helps them in some ways to sort of rewire their neural pathways around their own story. Like I said, sometimes if you're analyzing it from the perspective of how it affects you personally, it's hard to take a step back and say, what are the possibilities here for me, and how can I look at them as sort of being infinite instead of like narrowly focused.
That's really interesting, because I don't think I've ever personally associated like a rewiring that occurs with tarot, but you're absolutely right, because I can only relate it to like shrooms and stuff. I feel like it's almost kind of like it is allowing you like to not keep on going in the same grooves, but to actually see other things are firing up.
Yes.
Wow. That's
really cool. I mean, the thing that's always The way my brain works around this stuff is like, what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? And by the way, it's also why I feel like I have a kind of certain set of ethical guidelines that I like to work under when I'm reading tarot, because I do think that, well, I mean, everything is suggestive. Do you know what I mean? Like, and you have to take into account the placebo effect, So for instance, there are certain ways that I read where I leave things very general because I don't want to plug it into specifically, because God forbid I get that wrong and then the person is hung up on the particulars of the way that I plugged that in. I want them to be able to use it so that it will be helpful within their situation that's personal to them. So like oftentimes people will come to me like, should I break up with this person? I'm like, ooh, that's not really my place to say. It's not my business, right? But what tends to come up in readings is pinpointing the issues, whether there are like power struggles within the relationship, whether there's a need to people please within the relationship. And so what I can do is I can say, here are some of the energies that you want to be aware of. And then I leave it to you to decide whether or not you're able to work those things out with your person, full on knowing too that relationships are complex, right? Like we ourselves can work on whatever we're bringing to the situation, but we have very little control over what the other person is doing or not doing within the circumstance. So again, like I don't like to get too specific with things because that's not my business. Like I'm not a person's higher power. In some ways, I'm a translator for higher universal, forces or insight, But people often come to me and say, like, that, whatever you said, those things that you said might happen, happened, right? And so then I'm always like, did I see it happening, or did we talk about it and then that allowed the energy to coalesce around that, and then that's what possibility was born out of it? I don't know. I really do believe that time is not a linear progression. Actually, things that are happening in the present affect the future. They also affect the past. So it's a very interesting thing. We as humans trying to go about leading our daily lives, and working through what I think are sort of, in some ways, deep karmic lessons.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it's really interesting because up until this conversation, I guess I had never really thought about people who maybe haven't really been exposed to this more spiritual world or had tarot readings in the past coming to the table and really thinking they're having their future read, when really what you're getting is just a more comprehensive look at the sort of energies in motion and circumstances in motion. I mean, and then you choose from there what to manifest from that. And I've had tarot readings in the past where the cards applied to a couple different circumstances in my life, whether I was talking about my professional life or my personal life, and they could be applied in multiple ways. And I think that's a really important piece of the puzzle, to just really like take the time for self-reflection and understand, what does that mean for me and what do I really want to focus on, versus like somebody telling me where I'm going to be in 10 years, because then
but also like, because the readings can also apply to multiple pieces of your life, I feel like it almost kind of lifts up the themes and the lessons that you're meant to be learning at that time. It's almost like every situation in your life has some central sort of like thing that you're trying to learn, and it may be that it's manifesting in different problems and stuff, but ultimately the base issue that you're trying to solve in your life could be the same.
Well, and I think it's true for most of us that we bring ourselves to every situation that we're involved in. We like to think that our lives are really compartmentalized. I'm like this over here, and I'm like this over here, and these things are separate, distinct entities, and they're not, right? Like if I have a fear of abandonment or displeasing somebody in my personal sphere, chances are I'm bringing that energy to the workplace as well, totally. Right? Yes. And that if I can look at that underlying root cause, okay, I acknowledge that that's a theme that's coming up in both these areas, and then I can even go deeper. Well, where does it come from? What are its origins? And then how can I choose to reframe my identity around that? Then you're free to act differently in all settings, right? And that's what I feel like the tarot is so good at, you know?
You were mentioning that you're studying for your master's in psychology. Is that how you plan on kind of bridging the gap
For
a
sure.
little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think it's a really, you know, I you know, when I talk to people, and I have these kind of long-standing relationships with my clients, and I know a lot of them are in therapy, or I know that, you know, there's crossover, right? And one of the comments that I get on a regular basis is like, I got more out of this session in 40 minutes than I did out of like 6 years of therapy, because I didn't know what to talk to my therapist about.
Yes.
It gets you to zero in on the things that actually need to be addressed. I mean, and you know, I can't speak, there's so many different therapeutic approaches. Do you know what I mean? So I don't obviously know what their therapist, how they were taking them through, whether it was cognitive behavioral or whether it was, but I do know that this is a great tool to get people to go deep in a really short amount of time, and then to go in and look at some of those things from a perspective that allows people to be detached enough that they're not afraid to look, but then also that's personal enough that they can conceive of how this is affecting them, and then how they might work with it in a different way.
Do you think part of it is the pressure of therapy? Like therapy
Yes.
has a stigma even around it,
Yes.
right? Like it's like I'm going to a therapist, or I'm going into therapy.
In general, we don't seek help like that unless we're in dire straits, right? And so and that's problematic for a couple of reasons, right? Like first of all, people don't think that they can go to a therapist if they're just sort of mildly struggling with certain things in their lives, and then they're not really supported in a way that would be most helpful to them, which is usually the people that come to me for tarot readings, right?
Well, and also access to resources. Like a lot of people's health insurance doesn't cover.
That's right. That's right.
You know, talk therapy
That's
or
right.
traditional therapy. So,
And quite honestly, you know, this whole idea of self-care, Western culture tends to revolve around answers that look like the magic bullet theory. Like we want things fast and easy. We want one solution that's going to fix it for all times. And sadly, I don't think really anything works that way. We didn't come to an ecological crisis in society overnight. It was a steady progression towards this. And so sadly, it's also going to be a steady solution as well. It's there isn't one thing that's going to be the breakthrough thing that's going to fix everything for all times. Not personally, not collectively. And so that being said, like consistency is really important. If you can't afford to go to therapy, okay, I can only afford 4 sessions. Well, how much is that really going to have an overarching effect on you know your personal health and growth? You know, like when we, you know, make changes in our diet, we have to keep those changes up. Like we have to keep eating fresh vegetables and fruits, you know. Doing it once isn't going to have much of an effect at all. And so absolutely, I think that like anything that's accessible to people, that people can afford to do on a regular basis, that's like a really great thing. And again, I want to be able to sort of like have a foot in both worlds, you know, make myself available to people who are seeking sort of, you know, deeper, more traditional forms of therapy, but also continue to do the work where I'm able to interface with people where they're like, I just want to do a fun check-in. I just feel like, you know, I want to have this kind of interaction and, you know, see what's up. And because I think it serves a purpose for both ways, you know.
You know, when I was talking to my friend Ruby, who actually introduced me to you, she was saying, like, I'm really interested in learning tarot. I want to get into it because I feel like even for her, you know, deep dive into her healing, it was like, she called it the gateway. It was like the gateway drug to it, because there's something so, I mean, maybe it's because it's visual. Maybe it's because of there's not this like stigma with tarot. It seems like it's like a party thing, you know, it seems like it's just like light and, you know, like you kind of get in, you play with it and you get out. But really, it actually has so much more power behind it that, you know, and I guess you go into it with what you want to get out of it. So,
Yeah.
you know, it pulls people in to look closer.
Yes.
With this very like sort of non-serious kind of shiny exterior.
Yeah, I'm like thinking back actually to the first tarot reading that you and I had together. This was like right after we had left our corporate jobs. And I remember being so nervous. I was like sweating bullets because I was like, okay, we just made this like huge decision to just like blow our lives up.
Yeah.
We have no idea what the future holds, but also like we had so much healing and recovery, and I was like still so deep into that like PTSD mindset.
Oh yeah.
You know, and like she gave it to me.
Yeah.
You know, but it was still, afterwards, I was so thankful that we did it because you're exactly right. It's like I couldn't see the forest through the trees. And that helped me just sort of like take a step back. Even if there were things that I couldn't apply to specific circumstances in the moment, it gave me a perspective where when things came up, I could
like,
be
oh,
more
that.
conscious of how I wanted to respond to it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, with all these healing modalities that we've been researching, I feel like the one almost like through line or common theme is, you know, we all have the healing capacity within ourselves, right? And so, yes, we're coming to you for a reading and you're very intuitive and you're telling us, like, you're reading the cards, but really the application is happening in here and how we choose to hear it, how we choose to, you know.
100%. I mean, that's, you know, all healing is a collaborative effort, you know, and again, goes very much against sort of the Western tradition of things. Like, right, we go to the doctor who has the, you know, appropriate white coat and the letters before his name, and that person is sanctioned to handle my healing. But that's really not how it works, you know. If I have a whole pharmacy available to me on the inside of my body, and if I just know how to trip certain genetic levers, then I can turn switches on genetically to cut out certain diseases, and I can turn switches off that need to block other certain diseases. And the more I can get into this mindset of like, I have more power than I think I do in certain circumstances, then and to be fair, things happen to people, and you know, I'm not one of these people who's like, oh, you brought that cancer on yourself, right? Like, you know, it's complex, right? Things are environmental, you know, we don't have control over everything that's happening even within our bodies. But if I take some of that power back from, you know, the medical practitioners or the pharmaceutical companies, then I have more choices, you know? And the truth is that if I feel better about my healing journey, then what I've noticed, and by the way, you know, I struggle with health stuff. Like I was diagnosed with late stage Lyme 2.5 years ago, and I've been on this deep dive trying to figure out the best way to manage and control this illness because it's intense, you know? But I know that I feel better when I'm empowered in my search and I'm not at the mercy of what Western medicine is saying is in service of my illness. You know, it's like, I mean, I literally feel better if I know I can get out there and be proactive in what I need to do.
I think we're finding actually across a lot of healing modalities that there's a really beautiful sort of union between Western and Eastern medicine. And I think it's amazing what you're doing, like getting your master's in psychology and then also doing the tarot, because more than anything, I'm starting to come around to this idea of like just having the ability to speak about these experiences in different ways helps people come to their own understanding. If you can talk to them in a language that they understand. And there's a really like awesome way to do that and to sort of navigate through some of these situations with more traditional training, and then also your experience with reading tarot for so long, that brings your clients something totally unique that they can't find anywhere else. That will take them that much farther.
Well, and my feeling was always like, I want to keep adding tools to my toolbox. You know, it's like ultimately my goal for doing this is just to be helpful, is just to be of service. When, in fact, it's my prayer before every reading that I do for a person, allow me to channel the highest good for this person. And so, take me out of it, take my ego out of it, allow me access to a higher bird's eye view that it's going to be most helpful for this person. And so once that intention is on the table, then I trust that whatever needs to come through me that's going to be of service to that person will come through. And you're absolutely right. You have to be able to speak the language of the person who's sitting in front of you, because here's the thing about shamanic healing. If you don't believe it's going to work, it won't work. So if you take somebody who's from the Midwest and really shut down to that stuff, I mean, look, I think that, it's even my doctor is like, when I bring certain, alternative therapies to her or treatments, she's not totally closed, but she's a little bit trepidatious. And my thing is like, science is really an observational study where you're tracking data over time. And you cannot ignore the 2,000 years of scientific study that Native peoples have brought to plant and animal medicine.
Yeah, before the last 200
right?
years. Yeah.
So you can't ignore that. These people are not making this stuff up. They would not be stinging themselves with nettles to treat arthritis if it didn't work. The proof is in the pudding. And so you can't discount these people because they didn't do it in a laboratory with a controlled setting. They were still bringing this observational eye to what works and what doesn't. That being said, again, going back to this thing of speaking people's language, you have to kind of know what a person's perspective is to know what's going to work for them. Because if you drop the person from the Midwest into the Amazon jungle and have a shaman go to work on them, it may not have that same effect because that's too wildly outside of their own.
Then they're leaving with PTSD.
Right? And so you have to be able to sort of like do the dance, right? The thing that I think is so amazing about some of these alternative methods or perspectives is that it allows for bigger realms of possibility, like if you take a drug and you are expectant of a certain result, then that's probably the only result you're going to get. But if you're going to go and have kind of like a sort of a more broad spiritual, when you're going to get in there and look at it from a more broad spiritual perspective, that there are a lot more ways for things to transpire out of the interaction.
Absolutely. How did you find tarot?
I was a kid, really. Like my one of my good friends in high school introduced me to tarot for the first time. She had a deck and she did a reading for me, and we were in her room, and it felt so, it's like I think that this is an experience that a lot of women have, that kind of I was a very witchy kid. Do you know what I mean? Getting together with my female friends and being very ritualistic around the way we would do certain things, and getting into that sort of mindset or that emotional space of like evoking emotion through ritual. Like that's what we did. And of course, this was before the days of the internet, so that there wasn't a lot of information available about it. Like, you couldn't just be like, oh, this is interesting, I want to do a deep dive on what these things mean. Like, you were just kind of going into it fully intuitive. And I was also an artist. That was pretty much my, growing up, I identified as an artist. So the other thing that happened to me a lot is I would make drawings or paintings that depicted certain things that I was feeling that would then happen in my life. And I feel like that's very much like a crossover for tarot as well. When you concretize things visually, then it allows you them to find formation in your life. And I think you're absolutely right. You touched on this earlier. There's something about this being a visual modality, and I think that's its power. So it allows us to visualize different frameworks and be like, oh, well, what if this is possible? Or what if this is possible? Or this is showing me something in a visual way about what's going on with me. How can I work with this, So oftentimes I would make drawings or paintings that would reveal something to me in a way that I feel like tarot also does. It's just that the images are already provided for you, you know? And so I was always into it, you know, even when I was going through school the first time, I was like studying the occult and, you know, studying, you know, different Western mystery schools, you know, like Hermeticism and, you know, what are all these people talking about? They're all, it seems like they're saying the same thing, you know, again, before the days of the internet, but like...
And they were saying the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Literally.
Like, what is Kabbalah and what are the Freemasons saying? And what, you know, and what, you know, what are these, where's the overlap, you know? And, you know, Hinduism and quite honestly, there isn't as much... I mean, they all come to things in their own specific way, but there's a lot of bleed over, right? And, you know, philosophically around the axial age, there was a lot of information that was just being traded around through via the Silk Road through all these different, you know, societies and philosophical traditions, like, you know, and a big one is just this idea that consciousness creates reality.
Yeah. The crossover is, I mean, that's actually honestly 90% of the fun for me personally is like hearing a term in this world and then making that correlation in this world and saying, oh my God,
it's
that's
fascinating.
exactly the same.
Yeah, it's
you know?
fascinating. Like we're arguing semantics.
Yeah.
Yes,
because we're actually getting to when you get down to the root cause of things, it's the same.
Yeah.
Consciousness creates reality. And so then how can I create my reality consciously? That's the thing, right? How can I employ that as a tool to affect certain outcomes? And this is really just the basic practice of magic throughout the ages, right? What can I do to focus my attention to elicit a certain outcome, whether it's to heal, whether it's to bring about bountiful crops, whether it's to control the behavior of my livestock, whatever it is, you know, that is the basic premise of like of magic throughout the ages, you know. And more we are acknowledging, like, I mean, I always wonder, like, why doesn't all science drop everything and just study the placebo effect? Because if you can somehow elicit a spontaneous remission of all cancer, then that should be the thing that you're trying to study instead of, like, you know, the race to find the one drug that we can patent and get rich off of. And, you know, maybe it's intention too, right? Like, if your intention is really to help people and not to, like, profit, then you're going to go to the thing that seems like... Because the power of the mind is like within all of us, right? There's no one who doesn't have access to that.
I just finished reading a couple books about quantum physics because I have gone deep into the wormhole of all of this stuff. And one of the books, I believe it was called The Physics of God, was actually talking about how studies have been done with patients who suffer from schizophrenia and multiple personality disorder. And they have found that many of these patients, when their personalities shift, their physiological bodies shift, their fingerprints, their eye colors, their scars, their hair, and it's like as soon as the mind believes that it's going to be something different, see something different, everything in the universe comes together and it physically manifests within one body. And sometimes, like, there was one example that they were giving in the book where this particular person had switched over personalities like 10 or 12 times in the span of less than an hour and a half, and every single one of them showed different handwriting, different fingerprints, different eye colors, like physiologically total morph.
Yep.
And then some of them could speak one language, some of them couldn't speak another language, like their accents would change, their vocabulary would change. I mean,
and how,
it's crazy. Right?
And how do you account for that with this sort of Newtonian mechanical view of the world?
Exactly.
You just can't. You know?
Yeah, but it really, for me, I was like, wow, that is a very, very, like, tangible example of the power of the mind.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Truly.
Which is just insane if you start thinking about, like, all the things that could happen when you realize, like, this is possible.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Well, that totally gets into even, the power of prayer and getting people together.
Absolutely.
And, like, setting your intention in this one
and
point.
having multiple, like, and they have done a lot of studies obviously on this, where, the more people you can get to focus on one intended goal, the more powerful the outcome is.
Yes.
The more people you have focusing on peace, the more that has the effect of changing crime statistics within cities. So there really is something to collective consciousness as well, right? It's like, definitely I have to be in charge of my own individual consciousness and what I'm putting out there. What I'm hoping as well is, with all these different people who are interested in different spiritual modalities like yourselves, I feel like in some ways religion has failed us, and maybe that's like a very controversial statement to make, but I think that a lot of religions have become highly politicized, and they have turned people off, but there's still this deep need to organize this idea that there's something bigger than me, right? That there's something more than just the mechanics of my going through my daily life and digesting food or whatever, and that people need that. Yeah. They need it on a personal level, because like you said, it sort of takes the pressure off a little bit. Like, oh, it's not just all up to me to figure it out, that I can orient myself towards sort of a higher consciousness, and that consciousness can direct me throughout my day. But then also that we can come together and share in this umbrella of consciousness and direct focus societally at a much larger scale as well. Like, oh, we want to heal the planet. Well, let's work on healing the planet. Yeah. Right? And let's come together. I may not know exactly the logistics of how that's going to happen specifically, but if I can orient my attention towards that through this sort of like an amplifier of mind, collective mind, then maybe we can find solutions together where it seemed like there were none, Yeah. And so I think that spirit is just part of who we are as beings, and we've been sort of worshiping at the altar of science for a long time, and sort of poo-pooing or disregarding the spiritual aspects of things. But I think that more and more people are like craving it. They need it. And hopefully there are ways where it's not either or, it's and both, right? Yeah. Where we're not going to vilify science, but we're not going to vilify spirituality either. We're going to have them come together in a collective contract to make things better for everybody.
Yeah. Well, it has to, right? It's like a lot of the energy stuff that we've been studying too. It's not that it's an easier route in, but I feel like you can't ignore that part of it, or that part of the healing. We've now met a Reiki master who works specifically with cancer patients, and they're going through their chemo, doing the whole Western healing, but with the Reiki, in addition to that, it's just easing all of the symptoms and all that.
When I learned, I'm a Reiki practitioner as well, and when I was learning to do Reiki, my friend Alan was dying of cancer. And Alan was a very meat and potatoes kind of guy. And I said to him, I know you're not really into all this stuff, but if this would be helpful to you, it would be helpful to me to practice, and I would be happy to give you this treatment anytime you wanted. And so he's like, yeah, whatever, I'll try it out. And it was profound. He, the first time we did it, he was like, Erin, I feel high. He's like, I can't tell you, the majority of my day, I walk through my day in tremendous amounts of pain. And for the time that you're working on me, for extended into hours after, I actually feel good in my body. Now, Alan died. It didn't. The Reiki did not keep him from succumbing to cancer, but it did affect his quality of life. And I gave him Reiki twice a week, every day until he died, and it was 6 months. And it was such an amazing experience to see. I was sold. I basically learned to do Reiki because I thought it would make me a better tarot reader, right? It would open me up as a channel. But I came to really respect that practice all on its own. It's very powerful. And so, yeah, it's everything from just and again, depends on what you're working with. Are you working with cancer, or are you working with just needing to shift some bad habits, right? That these these things can be used to treat people wherever they're at, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, like I said, it didn't save Alan, but it sure made things nicer for him in the end.
Well, and that's what's about, right? Like, just leveling up your bottom line.
Yes.
Just easing things, because life doesn't magically get easier.
Right,
like, bad things don't stop happening.
Yes, correct.
Tough situations don't stop occurring, but you just are able to move through them with more grace and less pain, hopefully. And I think, actually, to your point about how we're sort of in this like spiritual crisis right now. It's like an existential spiritual crisis. And I think people have been really polarized by religion, because probably even more so now than ever, because we're in such a time of like divisiveness and tribal mentality of us versus them. But I also think that makes this such a really powerful time for healing modalities like tarot and like Reiki, because people who may not have been open to it before are now finding their way to this kind of healing, because it's not restricted by pharmaceutical companies or insurance, and it's not ascribing to, you know, a lifestyle that may or may not feel authentic to you. It's just open to everyone who wants to.
And some of the people, like,
it.
You had mentioned earlier that it seems sort of like fun or light. Like, I do a lot of tarot readings at events. It's one of the ways that people contact me a lot to do events. And those are some of the people who actually are the most dramatically affected, because they're not expecting much, right? Like, when you're giving readings at a party and people are sort of like, whatever, you know, they sit in front of you, and then all of a sudden you reveal something to them that's really pertinent and profound and personal. They're like, wow, I had no idea. And to see the lights come on for them is really rewarding, right? It's like, because like, what, I don't care, you know, I'm not here to proselytize one way or another, but again, for me, the proof is in the pudding. If it's helpful in any way, I am so happy to bring it to you and make it available to you. And so I often get people who are like, wow, that just blew my mind at events or parties. And they're like, I'm going to do this more, you know?
Tarot honestly was the turning point for me to decide to quit my job. Wow. You know, and it was my first ever tarot reading. And also I was in Joshua Tree with my husband, and we, I somehow through the Instagram rabbit hole found Karis Reed, who now lives in LA, but she was living at Joshua Tree at the time, and she made house calls, and it was like the easiest thing. I'm like, all right, let's just do this for fun. It was totally just meant to be this like fun bonding thing with my husband and I. Completely changed my life, literally. At that moment, this was early November in 2017, I decided like, okay, I'm doing this, I'm quitting my job, and we're going to start this thing, you know. As before I talked to Sam too, but in that moment it really did shift. And I'm curious too, it's like at its most basic form, it's a deck of cards that you can buy, you know, online, but for somebody who is interested in getting into it and just to use it as a tool for themselves.
Well, I know what the cards mean by now. I've been studying it a long time, and I've done self-study, and I've also had teachers. So I've gone about it a couple of different routes. But I also know that I have very personal interpretations of what the cards mean. Like, I'm going to be a different reader than Karis is going to be, right? And because we're each bringing our own unique perspective to the world to these readings. Now, that's not to say that my readings are wildly divergent. Like, I think there's probably enough commonality that you're going to go like, you know, wands are representative of creativity and passion, right? In a general sense. But I think that the thing that's going to make it useful to you as a tool is to develop an intuitive relationship to what these images mean, and to drop into it that way, and really work with one card at a time and just see what comes up for you, and then later go and check that with the, you know, the archives and see what everybody else has to say about it, you know, and that then you can really get a sense of how this starts to be like the hieroglyphics of your internal being, right? Like, oh, when I arrange them this, the story tells me this, you know? I really do think of tarot as being very similar to other forms of divination, like the I Ching or astrological transits. Like, basically, you can take a certain distinct set of anything, whether it's planets that represent certain energies or markings that represent certain things, and when you throw them together in a way, they'll reveal something out of it. Like, you know, whether it's like, you know, throwing the coins for the I Ching, or like, what is the astrological configuration in the sky today, that has something to tell us about what's going on internally, right? As within, so without, right? It's just like the universe reflecting back to us. When we look into the patterns reveal something, right? If we're willing to pay attention, if we're willing to look. And it's just like language itself. Language is this way that we convey certain ideas. And it's like a way of bringing these words together to form meaning. That's very much what tarot is.
Actually, you bring up a really good point, because tarot decks can be so different, and so can the formats in which the tarot readers read the decks. So how did you come to find your deck that you work with normally, and what's your format for your spread?
So I like the Rider-Waite deck. It's not the oldest deck, but it's pretty old. It's like 1800s, I think, or early turn of the century, the first century. And I really love Pamela Coleman Smith. She was extremely knowledgeable about the philosophical school that she was working within. You know, she was well versed in Hermeticism, but she's the one who kind of like originated this idea of drawing all the cards in the major arcana and the minor arcana. So every card is a detailed description of a certain state of human consciousness. And it just happens to be the one that's most familiar to people. People who maybe know nothing about tarot look at this deck and they're like, "Oh, I know what that is." Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I love other interpretations. Like, I have a whole bunch of other decks, but this is the one I like to work with when I'm reading for people, because it's just the one that people tend to take in the message most immediately. So I also, aside from the Celtic Cross, like, that's the one that I do that's sort of most traditional, where the placement of the cards has a meaning. Other than that, I'm really intuitive about the way I read. Like, I just pull cards, a certain amount of cards, and they give me insight about like, I like to do it like, let's do it by question. We'll sort of throw a general spread with a Celtic Cross, and then we'll just pull cards around whatever question to narrow things down and get more specific.
Oh, that's cool.
Because the cards will tell the story, right? I don't need to make it like, so this whole idea of like past, present, and future, that gets revealed in the, like, you know, there are certain cards in the deck that are talking about letting go of the past. I don't need to have a placement of the card that says that this is in the past. The cards are directing me to look to something that needs to be let go of in the past anyway, right? So the cards give me all the information I need to know, essentially. And I let them direct me in terms of how we investigate things.
That's what I found so fascinating about the reading, because I think in previous readings, it's usually just one spread, right?
Right.
And then we like really dig into that spread.
Mm-hmm.
And because we had so much time,
Yep.
I sat with you for about an hour. I mean, I think I threw out 4 or 5 other questions, and it's not like you reset the deck ever.
Yeah,
it was
no.
just like more cards were pulled,
Yep.
more cards were pulled, more cards were pulled, and everything was so relevant.
Yep.
You know, it kind
Well,
of.
it's a living oracle. That's what you start to realize. Like, it's like when I treat this as sort of like it's almost like there's a projection from spirit, and that when I ask a question, spirit is going to illuminate this thing to me through this lens of tarot. I just find that it works. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, again, if I didn't think it was effective, then I wouldn't have devoted all this time and energy to it. You know, I have no interest in reinventing the wheel, right? It's like, what I found is that it's really effective for people. And it's reliable. You know what I mean? Like, I very rarely have come up with some spread or something and people are like, it's not relevant to me at all. I have no idea what you're talking about. It's like, I mean, and you know, look, occasionally people are sort of like, well, I'm not sure, you know, but in general, the cards reveal something that's meaningful to the person that I'm reading for. It doesn't go unnoticed.
Yeah.
How do you handle situations with clients who are like, I don't really think so?
It like I said, it doesn't happen that often. You know, I recently had a woman who, you know, I think always the most difficult things are when people are asking about relationships with other people. And I always like to be really clear about this because it's very hard for me to read about other people. Like, I can't know what's going on with your partner, right? He's not sitting in front of me. He is not giving his agreement to be looked at energetically through this. You're giving me the license to look at you energetically. So to some degree, I'm going to get, because this relationship affects you, I'm going to get some of this residual effect through you. But I don't like to predict what their behavior is going to be like, right? Are they cheating on you? It's a really hard question. Do you know what I mean? Because things are complex. Do you know what I mean? And again, I didn't get somebody's okay to go look into their energetic field. So I recently had a thing where I remember the cards were sort of like, this is probably a relationship you should move on from. But she was really upset with me because I hadn't told her that he'd been cheating on her. And I just said, I'm really sorry that you feel that I failed you somehow or that you're upset about that. I just want you to know I'm not God, you know? Like, I'm
free will.
I'm acting as an interpreter and I can only tell you what I see. And I'm not always going to get the specifics of it just right? Because I think there are multiple ways for things to happen. So I never want to give somebody the impression that, like, I'm essentially reading a download, like I'm watching a TV screen and I'm seeing every single thing that's going on in your life and their life. It's like, it isn't like that, you know? These are broad impressions. But in general, the impressions line up, right? In general, they are pretty accurate, but when it comes to interpreting specifics, that's why I tend to be like, I like to leave things a little bit more general because it's not, first of all, it's not my business to plug it in. What if I tell you he's cheating and he's not? And then that opens up a whole other can of worms. Do you know what I mean? It's like, the point is to try to orient people in a helpful way to get them to make the best decisions for themselves, right? Because in general, clearly, if somebody's cheating, there are other things going on within the relationship that are unhealthy and need to be addressed in one way or another. And either you're going to be able to address them proactively with your partner, or that's not going to be possible. And you're going to have to make the decision about whether or not you're going to leave that relationship for yourself, you know? So it does get tricky. I mean, again, you know, you are in a position of counsel and you have to be very careful about the way you handle things with people because there isn't just one formulaic answer. You know, I can't tell you how many people come to me and they're like, I need a second opinion because I went to a tarot reader and they told me I'm married to the wrong man. I'm like, ooh,
That's so bad.
It's like, I'm like, well, first of all, that's good that you're here because that's not going to be the way I would never tell you that, first of all, you know, like, so I think it's important to recognize that, you know, if you're not mindful about the way you communicate certain things, you can do damage. Yeah. Like I said, my intention is always to be helpful, never to do more harm, you know? But I mean, and in a way, it's not so dissimilar than the doctor saying, I give you 6 months to live.
Yes.
You know,
totally.
That's none of your business, man. None of your business. You do
and
not know.
They're wrong all the time.
They're wrong all the time. But saying that to somebody could affect their healing trajectory.
It's like manifest destiny.
Right?
Yeah,
and so,
like the seed is officially planted.
And so, again, you have to be really cautious about the way you state things because people take it in. You know, they're paying attention.
And that's energy.
It's energy.
All those thoughts, words, everything is energy.
Yes.
What is like the most important lesson that you feel like you've personally learned from tarot?
Ooh, good question.
That is a good question.
Let's get deep.
I really want to do that question justice, but the thing that sort of jumps into my head most immediately is just the power of using the image to focus the attention. Because, you know, look, here's the thing. The practice that I have that probably most affects me as a person and probably me as a reader is I am a long-time meditator in the Vipassana tradition. And in fact, one of my tarot teachers was also my meditation teacher. I really do come from kind of a Buddhist perspective, and my practice is very Buddhist. And I think that the thing that tarot really impresses upon me is that these cards are a way to visually conceptualize certain things and focus my attention in ways that are useful to me. So in a way, tarot is just another tool for me to harness the power of the mind. And the thing is that meditation set it all up for me to be able to even stay with an object of focus, right? Like before I meditated, I was subject to monkey mind, right? Oh, I'm getting distracted by this, and I'm getting distracted by this, and I'm getting pulled over here into this. And it didn't matter what messages I was getting, it was all gobbledygook. Do you know what I mean? It's like that until you can train your mind to stay focused on things and sit with something and allow that impression to work on you, and then practice discernment, because that's the other thing. Not everything your head tells you is helpful or true. And so to be able to really sit with something in kind of a non-judgmental way and see if there's any value into what it has to show you, tarot will just be more noise. Like if you can't really sit with something and see if there is validity to the message coming out, then it's just another way that your brain can puppet you around in the world. So that's probably, tarot works as a tool to focus the mind, but if you don't have the capacity to focus the mind in the first place, it's not going to mean anything to you.
Yeah,
that's probably what I would say.
Ellen and I talk about that all the time, actually, because when we first started meditating, it was really to ease stress, to sleep better. It was like to solve symptomatic problems of being burned out and exhausted and stressed out. But the farther that we've gotten into this journey and the more, different healing modalities we try and the more we learn, the more it becomes clear that we didn't learn meditation to solve symptomatic problems. We learned it so that we could do these other things more effectively.
It's a foundation.
Yeah, it's a really, really powerful foundation. I think people really underestimate the power of even just meditation sometimes.
That's right.
Because it can be really hard to get into, especially in a culture like ours. But everything is about controlling the mind.
Yes.
It all comes back to controlling the mind.
Yes.
This was incredible.
Such an incredible
Thank you so much.
conversation.
This was amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I'm honored to be a part of your podcast. Thank you for asking me.
We're
No, your story is amazing. I love that you're doing your master. I feel like that's going to be such a powerful, powerful combination with tarot.
I have a hunch. We'll see.
I know. We'll keep following your story. We can't wait to see where it goes.
Yeah, thank you.
How can people find you?
Through my website, which is vardotarot.com, VARDOTAROT. Or come to Atwater Village on the weekends and you can see my caravan in person.
Awesome.
I love that.
Do you do FaceTime or
Yeah,
Skype?
absolutely.
Okay.
I read for people all over the world. So if you're not in Los Angeles, then you can still contact me through my website and we can do remote readings via Skype or FaceTime. So
super rad.
Yeah.
I love that.
Thank you so much. This
my
is awesome.
pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So if you'd like to find Erin, she's on Instagram at Vardo Tarot, VARDOTAROT, and she's also online at vardotarot.com.
Thanks for listening, and if you enjoyed this episode, please take the time to rate us and review us. It really helps us to continue doing this work.
Love you guys.
Music for Woo New is composed by Adam Miller.